point in time right now for AI is where Bitcoin was when it was 100. So like, I definitely missed out on Bitcoin was $100. I do not want to miss out or be left behind with this new gold rush here. So yeah, man, how organizations and companies are responding to this. I mean, I think that's gonna be one of the dominant themes of the next 12 months for the industry and for every industry, frankly.
This podcast is sponsored by Pragmatic Solutions, the player account management platform chosen by today's smart betting and gaming operators. Don't let technical constraints delay you from achieving your business goals. Expand your business, boost your margins, and dominate the market in any leading regulated jurisdiction with our powerful, flexible, and secure iGaming platform. Enjoy its extensive marketing tools, compliance protection, real-time data, and a wide portfolio of over 1,000 industry providers. It's time to upgrade your technology. Let Pragmatic Solutions show you the modern approach. Visit pragmatic.solutions and join the smart thinkers.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
Bingo, bango, bongo. Jesse Learmonth of Betting Startups here in the podcast with me today. How are you doing, Jesse?
I'm great, Pierre. I think this is number 4 for me on your podcast. So it's always great to see you, but I will say out of the gate here, it feels like just last month I was on your podcast. Somehow that was actually a year ago. So this to me is just a reminder of how fast time is moving in life in general. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but look, great to be back with you, man. And yeah, excited to get into it.
Oh my God, yeah, it could be a record number here as well, a record appearance on the podcast as a 4th attendance. This is our yearly tradition. This is one of the early signs of spring, actually, when Jesse Learmonth comes to the podcast. As I say, it's a clear sign that better times are ahead.
Right, the groundhog comes out of his hole, the flowers start blossoming, and I turn up on the Next.io podcast.
There we go. And to that end, I'm very curious to start off today by just asking a little bit, so sense check, how's the year been for you, Jesse? Building betting startups, you are in, you're ramping up the business at the moment, a lot of things are happening. Talk about what's going on with betting startups in the last year.
When you're in the weeds, in the trenches day to day, as you know, Pierre, it's hard to kind of zoom out and take stock at altitude. So I feel like I'm in the weeds right now, but I'll do my best to zoom out here and give a little bit of perspective as to where we are at. So a year ago, when I was with you, I talked about ambitions for 2025 to start to really build a business around what started off as a podcast. And the model I've been thinking about is a multi-vertical sort of modern media business, right? So last year, I had ambitions to launch an events vertical, not really intentionally, it was somewhat by accident, but we co-hosted 2 events last year and kind of cut our teeth in events. And it was really successful, a lot of work. I have such a deep appreciation and respect now for you and your team doing this, as regularly as you do. It's a lot of work. But it really validated to us that, for all of the effort we've been putting in to try and facilitate connection amongst stakeholders at the early stage, bringing together founders with investors, with vendors and suppliers, with operators, and just trying to create that connection. Really, nothing creates connection better than getting a bunch of people into a room together and having that in-person experience and just the energy, the enthusiasm, the community aspect. That to me really was one of the key takeaways from 2025 is just the power of being in person together. So betting startups, yeah, squarely in the events vertical now, trying to do more in-person activations, bringing people together and just, again, trying to do what we can to nurture the community. Beyond that, some other initiatives we're working on, I guess on the content side, Pierre, the podcast continues on. Just this week, actually, we released episode number 200. So I guess I'm doing this thing for the long haul now. Look, the podcast continues to be the thing we are best known for. And, it's kind of how we cut our teeth as betting startups. But my objective for 2026, when I get to the end of the year and when people hear the word betting startups, my goal is that they won't immediately think podcast. They might think about some of the other things that we're working on. So we're really trying to diversify all the activities we're doing. And again, all the different ways and mechanisms that we can leverage to support the early stage ecosystem. So to that end, the newest vertical, we just announced it earlier this week, Betting Startups Capital.
Yeah.
We are
Hot
going
off
to
the
be
press.
deploying capital. Hot off the press, man. Yeah, this is brand new. Really, really excited to partner up with two people I've collaborated with in the past, being Paris Smith, former CEO of Pinnacle, and Magnus Hedman, who also is involved with Pinnacle, as well as a number of other businesses within the industry. And the three of us, we're all builders by trade. We've all built different things within the industry. And, for Paris specifically, since she left Pinnacle a few years ago, she's been spending a lot of time, supporting startups. She's invested in, I think, 14 of them already over the last few years. She's advising a lot of them. So she's really rolled up her sleeves and, sort of launched the new chapter of her career working with startups. And, through that and through everything I'm doing with Betting Startups, her and I got to talking and we said, hey, this would be a really cool thing for us to partner up on together. We chatted with Magnus about it. He saw the vision. He believed in it. So the three of us are back in business. We obviously worked together at our respective times at Pinnacle, took a break, and now we're back. And Betting Startups Capital is a capital allocator. We're going to be writing some checks into some of the startups in this space. And, obviously through all the work we do, we talk to a lot of them. We see a lot of them. We have, I think, a bit of an advantage in terms of early access to a lot of these startups. And I do think between, the three of us, we can add a lot of value to those ones, especially the ones that are earlier on in their journey and need a bit of an accelerant, a bit of a boost. We think we can provide that to them in a few different ways. So yeah, look, I've never done this before. I've never allocated capital before, primarily because I've never had capital to allocate, but I'm going to be learning on the job here. I'm coming into this Pierre with a lot of humility. I didn't necessarily plan for this. This isn't something I necessarily aspired to do, but I'm going to lean into this. I'm going to be a student to the game. I'm here to learn as much as I can from others that do this professionally day in and day out. And, we're going to give it a go here and hopefully be supporting and backing some winning startups in the process.
What a journey, Jesse, as you point out. The podcast started a number of years ago, and you established a really interesting niche in the industry where you were kind of a window out for the startups and the most exciting kind of newcomers into the industry, where you enabled that platform to build and to grow, where startup founders could have their kind of first entry point and welcoming into the industry by jumping on the Betting Startup podcast and talking about what they were looking to achieve. And I know that many of the startups, as a result of that, have managed to kind of establish themselves from those very early days. And you really have established this kind of brand around betting startups, where the kind of startup ecosystem is something that you honed in on to the extent that, like, you as Jesse obviously have a deep understanding of different organizations, from having those early conversations, seeing how some of them bloom, seeing others fail perhaps, and just having that kind of ear to the ground along the way, which really positions you in a really interesting space at this point, where you start to allocate capital, having built that network, having built that trust with the startup founders along the way. And I think at the end of the day, between the capital allocators, there is that edge that you want, right? Which is not everyone get the opportunity to invest in the most exciting startups. And so you want to be that person, or to be that fund that get the opportunity to allocate fund into the most exciting kind of investors. And so is that the kind of play here, that because you have built that network, because you have that reputation within the industry, because you have that reach, that you see that as the edge of the fund? Or can you talk a little bit more about how do you plan to succeed, let's say, in this venture?
Look, we called it Betting Startups Capital because I do believe there is an element of brand equity that built up over 4.5 years of doing this. And to your point, part of what I've really focused a lot on, honestly, over those last 4.5 years is building that trust with the founder community. I do a lot in my days to just try and help out as much as I can without necessarily expecting or asking a lot in return. So I'm taking very much a long view towards this. And I just really subscribe to the belief that if you give value, at some point that value will come back to you. And, I'm still working to get that value back. But I do think what it's allowed us to do is really position ourselves to have an opportunity to get, as you say, that early access to what are hopefully some amazing deals that end up becoming, massively successful companies. And that is, I think, one of the edges we have is leaning into the Betting Startups brand by, activating our platform and really trying to be a bit of a beacon to draw in some of those earlier stage companies. We think we'll see them a lot sooner than others will. And, we think that's our edge, but that's also our opportunity to collaborate with a lot of other capital allocators in the space. I mean, look, a lot of them invest at later stages. They don't want to see a lot of the stuff we're seeing. I think one of the things we can do that really will differentiate us is, number one, spot the opportunities early. Number two, be able to support the very early opportunities, to develop them a little bit more, to get to a point where some of those later stage investors are ready to look at them. And because, we put in the time, the effort to nurture those companies, we hope that the other capital allocators will take a good look at it on the basis that we've been really rolling up our sleeves and getting involved. And look, between, again, the reach that we have with Betting Startups and, the platform and everything that comes with that, as well as from, for Paris. I mean, geez, she ran a global, a very influential global operation for 20 plus years. And just like the world-class operating expertise and experience that she has and brings to the table is going to be such a massive accelerant to a lot of these founders, not only from just a business perspective, Pierre, but for me as somebody who, worked for Paris for 6 years at Pinnacle. Above all else, and for everything she's known for, she is a builder of people. She is such an exceptional leader. And when she sees potential in somebody, she does everything she can to lift those people up, to support them, and to really be there to sort of coach, mentor, and advise. And I think as we go forward here together with Betting Startups Capital, that absolutely is one of the values that we as a collective are going to be able to deliver is, Paris's perspective. And for some of these entrepreneurs to have access to somebody like her really is a beautiful opportunity for them. So look, as somebody that got to benefit from, her mentorship over the years, I can say, with authority and with my hand over my heart here, that there is just such immense value in that. And, if you put the pieces together here, I think we have a unique proposition. And, time will tell, I guess. We've just launched it earlier this week. So let's not celebrate too soon here. But we think we're well positioned anyways to do something a little bit different, to take a bit of a different approach to it, and to be one of the earliest backers of the startups. One of the hardest things for a company, probably the first thing is getting the first customer. That's the hardest thing. But just, on the back of that is probably getting that first investor. And we think if we can come in and be, one of the first checks in, be that early believer, that early backer, help build some of that social proof, help them build some of that momentum, we think we can develop some of these companies into very real opportunities that could be category leaders within the space.
Brilliant, yes. And talk a little bit more about the details of the fund itself. What type of checks are you looking to write? Have you written any checks already, perhaps? Is there any particular type of organization that you are looking for at the moment? And how much capital are you looking to deploy?
So one quick clarification, we're using the word fund here out of a bit of laziness. Just to be very clear, structurally, it's not a fund at all. It's just a pool of capital between three people. So the three of us have basically put the capital pool together that will be deployed. So yes, we're calling it a fund, but not technically a fund from a legal or regulatory structural perspective. That aside, really, what we're going to be looking to do here for year one, and again, look, we're humble here. We don't have this big vision. We're going to kind of go with the flow with this thing. So we're wrapping it out sort of 1 year at a time. And for this first year, we expect and plan and hope to write 8 to 10 checks, let's call it, into early stage companies. Check sizes will range between about 100K to 250K. Again, we think we want to be one of the first checks in, and we want to be hands-on. Hands-on to the extent people want us to be hands-on. What I mean by that, to qualify that a little bit, is we're not going to write the check and disappear and just wait for the monthly investor updates to show up in our inbox. I mean, we want to be actively supporting our portfolio companies, actively supporting our founders. And for this first year, we want to get to the end of 2026 with sort of 8 to 10 companies that we've backed. And if that goes well, if we're happy with the trajectory, if we're feeling validated in the approach we're taking, we're already talking about what does that look like to scale it up starting next year. But again, we don't want to put the cart before the horse here. And in terms of the types of companies we're looking for, again, right now, we don't have we're not coming out to market saying, hey, this is the specific vertical or the specific thesis that we're following. Right now, at the very beginning here, Pierre, like we want to talk to everybody. We want to meet everybody. And I think organically over time, we'll eventually niche down, we'll find our lane and probably settle into a few more specific company types. But for now, we want to see everybody. We want to meet everybody. We want to talk to everybody. RIP my inbox probably for saying that. But, it's a case right now. We just want to get out there and just kind of, do more of the work we're already doing to talk to these founders, and we'll develop our own muscles around where we think we can add the most value. And from there, again, we'll probably tighten up our positioning around which verticals and company types we want to back. But for now, look, our doors are wide open. We want to see and talk to everybody.
Brilliant. So if you are a startup founder, you have a great idea, you're early out and you're looking for that pre-seed or seed investment, then Jesse's Betting Startups Capital is the right choice for you. But can you talk a little bit more, if you are that startup founder and you have that idea right now and you are looking to potentially jump into the fray and pursue that idea, I can imagine, as you point out, RIP inbox. There's a lot of messages. There's a lot of people who want to meet you. You can only write so many checks, right? So it's kind of like the 1 in 100 maybe reach out that will get that investment. Can you talk about, for you, what you are looking for in order to feel comfortable to write a check? What do you need to think about if you're listening to this right now, considering to maybe pursue your startup? What do you need to prepare, and how do you need to pursue this potential investment for you to be convinced that this is the one to go for and not the other 99?
So a couple things here, Pierre. First of all, at the very early stage and where we're looking and where we're spending our time, early stage ideas by definition don't have fundamental business KPIs and unit economics such that from an investment perspective, and we can't do like a fundamental business analysis on these businesses just because they're way too early. There's no fundamentals to assess. So therefore, what's left? Really, you have people with an idea and a concept and maybe a product, maybe some revenue, but really it's the people above all else. And as the old saying goes, at the early stage, you're really betting on the jockey, not the horse, right? So you're betting on the people. And in saying that, what that means to me, and if anybody listening that wants to kind of get into our heads in terms of how we're thinking about this, what that means to me is I always resonate the most with the founders that demonstrate some level of humility in their approach. Because entrepreneurship is a funny thing, right? On the one hand, you have to have a very, almost like a stubborn like conviction around your idea, because by definition, you're doing something that hasn't been done before or hasn't been done as well as you think it can be done. So you're really, by definition, contrarian and going against the tide. You have to really believe in what you're doing. So that's one thing that's important, but not to the point where you're not really willing to listen to the market or hear feedback or adapt, right? So there's this fine balance that founders, I think, have to strike between having conviction in their idea, but also having the humility to listen to the market, to listen to people, to take that feedback and adapt along the way. So talking about betting on jockeys and not horses, Paris really likes to sort of talk about this framework that she uses. She's looking for 4 things, right? She's looking for hungry, humble, smart, and passionate. And I actually think that encapsulates it perfectly, right? Those are the 4 sort of human characteristics we're looking for in the people we're talking to. It's hard to measure. It's hard to, it's hard to tell somebody how to show up and be those 4 things. So a lot of us gut feel, and that's not a helpful answer. We are going to be meeting a lot of people and talking to a lot of people. And, Paris, for all the people she's met and talked to over the years, she's developed a very good instinct around just sort of sizing up people and the people's ability, both when she led Pinnacle and led an organization of 600 people, but also out there in the wider world. And to me, to a lesser extent, I'm developing that ability. And we're going to be using our gut feel a lot to try and figure out, are these founders we're talking to, are they the people that have that hunger, that humility, that passion, and the intelligence to basically pull off the unthinkable? And that's what we're looking to back, is these jockeys that can show us that they have what it takes to, persevere, to have that resilience, to have that humility. And they have to have a good plan. Again, they probably should have a product in market. An MVP doesn't have to be an enterprise grade product at this early stage, but really also here in early 2026 with AI, like there's no excuse not to have a product in market. It costs literally nothing other than a weekend of time to sit down with Claude Code and crank out an MVP. Like there's literally no excuse. So yes, you have to have a product. Ideally, there's a bit of revenue or some evidence of market demand or some early traction. But, we want to get in before they hit the hockey stage curve of revenue growth. But we want to see those early signs and markers on the road. So it's all a bit subjective here. We're going to, again, refine and tighten up the thesis as we move forward. But as of right now, those are the things we're going to be looking for in the people we're talking to.
Yeah, but I think the underlying lesson here is really important for the startup founders, especially those that are looking for raising capital for the first time, which is that it's not as much about the business plan as you think. It's not about the business that you built to date and exactly laying out what's going to happen in the future, but it's more about you as the individual leading this business. Because tell me how many companies that are successful that have followed a strict business plan from day one. I would guess that most businesses have started with a wildly different business plan than what they actually turned out to be. And the lesson there is kind of like, it doesn't matter if you have a really great vision of where you want the bus to end up. It matters more how you drive the bus. And if you can build a team that can fix the bus when it breaks, that can re-navigate the bus when it takes the wrong turn, when that can navigate the bus through a stormy weather, so on and so forth. But the bus is probably not going to end up where you thought it was going to end up from the beginning. And the road is certainly not going to be well laid out in that regard. It's more about navigating and building that bus and building the team around it, right? So I think that is like the underlying really important thing to point out. But I think also to that end, it is still important to be able to vocalize a plan. It's important to be able to create a vision, even if it doesn't turn out to be the case in the end. But it's important to be able to vocalize a smart and intelligent plan that makes sense, right? And be able to come into a meeting with you and carry yourself well and do things. But at the end of the day, that is just kind of signs that you know what you are doing. And at the end of the day, that is what perhaps you are looking to see, is someone who is able to, do the impossible, as you say, and to navigate the company into success. Yes. So I want to switch topic here as well. So looking beyond the fund, Jesse, you built an incredible foundation to betting startups. Like you mentioned, you have a great reach, great reputation, great brand. You yourself is a great profile, trusted by the industry and so on. I'm curious to understand a bit more about the evolving business model, talking about, starting in one end and maybe ending up in another. Have you kind of thought about the grand master plan for betting startups? Obviously now the betting startup capital is a big project, I would imagine, within the organization. Is this the end goal, to scale that and to use that as your flywheel, if you will? Or do you have other ambitions as well in the business?
So I think the capital piece is part of the flywheel. I don't think it's the be all and end all. And if I zoom out a little bit from the specific verticals, since I last joined you on the pod, Pierre, I think the way I've been thinking about it and the way I'm now starting to talk about it is really what Betting Startups is building towards here. Is we are building a stack of value that we really, I think, want to be the operating system that powers the early stage within the industry. So like, what do I mean by that? We power the early stage by giving visibility and credibility to the startups through all of the content and media that we produce and have been producing. And we'll continue to do that. And we're going to continue to double down and triple down on that. And we're, again, just like amplifying all the things that are happening at the early stage, because very easy for the startups to get drowned out in the noise of the industry with incumbents that are, putting their big marketing budgets behind brand marketing and awareness campaigns. The startups get drowned out. So we're going to continue to champion the startups through all of the content and media. And that is part of the flywheel. Absolutely. As I mentioned, the in-person events that we're now doing under the Starties umbrella is a critical component to that. We really want to unify the community in person a few times a year when we're all together at different events, at different conferences. The capital piece now is another piece of that puzzle, where not only are we sort of elevating the community and bringing them together, but we're now actively backing them with capital and supporting, the ones that we deem to be most promising with actual hands-on support and some capital to back all of it. But where we're going now, and to me, like the unifying piece of all of this, which is the next piece of the puzzle, which isn't out yet, and maybe that'll be the subject of the next time I join you for number 5. We're building a technical foundation right now that to me will be the backbone of all of this. So we're building out a technical platform right now. Without getting too much into it today, Pierre, it's a SaaS product. It's a SaaS platform. From a betting startups perspective, from a pure business perspective, I think ultimately what we're building here is going to be something more akin to a SaaS business model than a media business model. The media is an important piece of it, and yes, we have sponsors and all that good stuff, but that's a difficult business model to scale, as I know you can appreciate. SaaS, on the other hand, has a lot of qualities about that model that we like. And our products from a SaaS perspective are going to be tools that are further supporting the work we're already doing to elevate startups, to create connection between startups and different stakeholder groups on the capital side, on the vendor and supplier side, as well as the operator side. And this platform is going to be the connective tissue that just connects all of these different disparate pieces together. So a little bit vague there, but that's what we're building out. That's the next launch, later Q1, early Q2. And to me, like that is going to be the backbone of it all. And when I said earlier that by the end of 2026, when people hear the word betting startups, I don't want them to think of the podcast. I do think that by the end of the year, when we get there, when people hear betting startups, they're going to be thinking of this platform that we're about to ship here. And I'm super excited for it. I'm a product person by trade. And when I did have a job back in the day, I mean, that's what I did was led product and product management. So to actually now productize a lot of the work we've been doing on the content and media side, to me is massively exciting, least of which, it allows us to have some scale, right? Me sitting in my inbox all day trying to just like send email intros between people is not infinitely scalable. This platform piece we're building is what's going to get us there. And it's what's going to unify these different verticals under one umbrella. So I'm super excited. Again, I think Betting Startups has the opportunity right now to sort of own the lane, if you will, to be that operating system. This is powering everything at the early stage. So it's a bit ambitious, but I'm feeling validated in the progress we've made over the last year or two with the launch of some of these new verticals to augment and complement what we started with a humble little podcast. So look, as we talked about before, Pierre, still building organically, still building brick by brick, still doing it my way. It's still just me on the cap table. So I get to kind of, have latitude over how we're going about things, but, remains a ton of fun. I continue to be validated every week by founders that reach out to me saying, hey, Jesse, like really appreciate you shining a light on the early stage ecosystem. Also for a lot of founders, and one, I guess, side anecdote, which I think is an interesting one that's really revealed itself to me recently is, founders, it's an isolating experience to build a company, right? Like, yes, you have a team around you. Yes, you have supporters around you. Yes, your family loves you and wants to see you succeed. But like, unless you are doing it, it's hard for other people to like really truly understand what it feels like to take on the weight of trying to do all of this and push that boulder up the hill. And one thing that founders have reached out to me to reflect back to me is that for them, going through their own personal struggles and that feeling of loneliness and isolation and, the self-doubt, why am I doing this? They see the podcast as almost being a peer support network where they hear other founders come on talking about their own journeys and they feel a sense of community. They feel a sense of connection and a sense that somebody else out there is feeling the same things that they are. So when we get together at our real life events and these founders meet each other, they're meeting each other through the lens of like, fellow travelers on this entrepreneurial journey that have experienced the pain together. And that is the thing that's been unifying everybody. And I think I knew that before, but really it's just come to light for me in the last few months with just like all of these founders saying, hey, Jesse, like really appreciate it. It's just making me feel better as I'm going out there, knowing there's other founders out there that are also feeling this way. So didn't expect that, but that's been a really like, a feel good, I guess, byproduct of all of this.
Great to see everything coming together, Jesse. And as you mentioned earlier, when we do number 5 here next year, when the spring comes again, it will be interesting to see exactly where we are in that space at that time. I want to shift focus here again to the second part of this podcast today. So we are kind of forming a little bit of a tradition here where every year we meet up for this podcast episode and we kind of highlight some of the most exciting startups that are currently operating in the space that maybe not everyone is aware of. So I want to today ask you, Jesse, to talk about 6 startup that you see as some of the most exciting ones in the space currently today. So I'll leave the word over to you to talk about the first one.
All right, I brought 5 or 6 with me. Let's go through the list here, Pierre. There's going to be a few. I think when we get to the end of it, there's going to be a through line here. Let's see if you pick up on it, but a bit of a through line here with the ones that I have picked for today. So first one I'm going to start with, they're still a startup. I mean, they're past the startup phase and they definitely have product market fit. But I do want to call out and highlight the team at Sparkit. Sparkit is a platform that lets users and B2B partners engage in bets that are a pari-mutuel model. They're not betting against the house. And really it's peer-to-peer, which I know right now with the proliferation of prediction markets doesn't sound that all novel unto itself. But the novel aspect of what Sparkit is doing, Pierre, is they have created this white label platform that operators can take, and operators that aren't currently offering betting can, be powered by Sparkit. And the cool thing about this pari-mutuel model they've introduced from an operator perspective, obviously because it's pari-mutuel, it is, de-risking the operator. They're not taking positions. They basically earn commissions under the pari-mutuel model. So commercially speaking, it's a bit of a novel model in that regard. The other thing that they've really leaned into heavily is, while they have sporting markets, a lot of the non-sports markets they've leaned into heavily across pop culture, reality TV, politics, and just niche events that are maybe underserved with more traditional sports books. And what Sparkit has found is a lot of success driving engagement with a lot of non-traditional demographics, being, females, who are watching, a lot of the pop culture shows or reality TV shows that want to engage more with that content. Sparkit is really seeing success and a lot of traction serving those segments and serving those audiences. As I mentioned, from the operator perspective, this is something that for them, provides a new level of engagement for their customers, but also provides incremental de-risked revenue on the basis of this pari-mutuel model that Sparkit has implemented. They have great traction. I know they're powering products with companies like Penn Entertainment, Station Casinos, as well as some of the tribal groups, Wonder Nation, and Foxwoods. So Sparkit's been doing, just really great, just building brick by brick as well. They've been at it for a few years, and I really love the fact that they are very thoughtful in how they're building the business. One of the co-founders, Evan, joined me on my podcast about 6 months ago, and they'd been on ages ago, back when they were closer to a startup. But he rejoined me on the podcast, and half of that episode, Pierre, I really loved. It actually deviated a little bit from the business talk and went more into what I was just alluding to, which is some of the founder struggles starting to border on, the mental health challenges of being a founder. And Evan really opened up in that episode, very vulnerable, and very grateful to him for sharing that vulnerability and the candor about sort of the grind and some of the painful aspects of the grind. And look, I mean, prior to co-founding Sparkit, Evan was a program manager at Google, living in California, earning a Google salary, and all of the perks and benefits come with that. And he gave that up to pursue Sparkit, right? So like massive risk. And when you're taking massive risk like that, you need to feel like there is a reward there. And for Evan, experiencing the ups and downs of the founder journey, still has to have that conviction. So he shared a lot with me, and I just really admire the mindset that they're bringing to building their business. Last thing I'll mention about Sparkit, Pierre, is our first event last March, the Starties Award Show in New York. Sparkit was named the Startup of the Year at the Starties. So, real quickly, the Starties event that we held last year, it was a little bit different from an award show perspective in the sense that there were no judges. There was a voting committee. It was a very transparent process. It comprised of both investors, of fellow founders, of leaders in the space. And it really was like a democratized process that, the people won on their merits. So Sparkit winning Startup of the Year wasn't because they sponsored the event or whatever the case might be. It really was because the peers and community recognized Sparkit for basically just, the way they're going about it, the progress they've made. And, they earned that recognition. And the last year since then, Pierre, Spark has continued to build and innovate. Just 2 weeks ago, they announced the launch of Sparkit AI, which is some really smart stuff. I won't even begin to try and articulate here, but it's something along the lines of a decentralized market pricing and event outcome system. They got a patent for it. So Sparkit's, great people first and foremost. They're really building thoughtfully, and the traction that they've generated has been through sheer grit and determination. And I really want to, tip my hat to Evan and Aaron on all the progress they've made with Sparkit so far.
Yeah, brilliant. So if I understand the business model correctly then, so this is like a skill gaming type product then, like a PvP. As you mentioned, the pari-mutuel element of it. So this is not sports betting or online gambling in a traditional sense via a local state license. This is piggybacking off this player versus player type model, right? Is that correct?
Exactly right. I think their trademark tagline, they call it the social bet work, right? So it's a social betting product, which is to say, peer to peer, person versus person. So there's no house. Spark is providing the technology, the infrastructure, the license, technology licensing, the GLI certification, all that sort of stuff. They're providing that to their operator partners, and then their operator partners are, pulling their customers in, and it's all peer to peer. To your point, there's no house involved, and I do believe they can correct me if I'm wrong here. I do believe that mechanism, that model does have them under a skill gaming umbrella in terms of just a regulatory classification.
Brilliant. Okay, interesting choice for number one, Startup of the Year, Sparkit.ai. Check them out. And let's move to number two.
So number two, I'm trying to pull at your heartstrings here a little bit, Pierre. Interesting anecdote. As I said, we just did episode 200 of the Betting Startups podcast. I think it was a few weeks ago. It's 194, 195, something like that. It was the very first poker startup I'd had on the podcast.
Here we go.
In almost 200. Here we go. Right.
I love it.
Almost 200 episodes, blew my mind, and absolutely shocking that I hadn't had a poker startup on. And it's interesting for me. I certainly don't have the depth of the poker background that you do, but for me, I got my first credit card in like 2001. I opened my first online sports betting account in probably a day later. And I got pretty swept up in the online poker wave of like the Chris Moneymaker era in like the early to mid 2000s, right? Up until Uega and like things really shifted. That's kind of when my online poker journey ended for all intents and purposes. But like I did kind of come up in, my own customer journey playing a lot of online poker in the early 2000s. And had you asked me, 15 years ago, would there be any poker startups? I'd be like, well, of course there'd be a ton of them because poker is this massive culturally relevant thing. And obviously after Black Friday happened, Pierre, poker just kind of, not went away, but like there was a vacuum all of a sudden. And,
it was
decimated. That's decimated, right? Absolutely decimated. From a US perspective, obviously that created an opening for DFS to enter, and like the rest is history as far as that goes. So like poker's kind of been like out of the limelight for a while. So as a long wind up here, I want to shout out some fellow Canadians, Poker Lab, based in Vancouver. Poker Lab started about 2 or 3 years ago. And Poker Lab is co-founded by an absolute like OG team of poker builders in the space. One of the co-founders, Scott Wilson, he was, I think, one of the co-founders of Paradise Poker way back in the day. Like we're talking back in the 90s at this point. Scott's been there and done that. He's built poker at scale before, both from a technology perspective, but just a consumer sort of mass market brand and product perspective. He later went on to Caesars and helped, lead a lot of their poker initiatives with Caesars Interactive. And Scott has assembled a team of other equally experienced poker builders in this space. And they are building a B2B infrastructure for poker. And they recognize that right now for operators, and I think, the US is a pretty good example of this right now, operators are looking for ways to expand their margin. They've probably come close to maximizing what they can from the sports betting vertical. Obviously, iGaming as a vertical has stalled from a legislative perspective. So like what's left there, they really do believe that poker can fill that void and become this incremental revenue channel for the operators. But the challenge is, and the problem is, operators probably aren't going to build their own infrastructure for poker. And there really is, for aforementioned reasons, been a gap of people building B2B technology and solutions for poker. So, Scott made a pretty big bet on this by starting this a few years ago. As he said on my podcast, I love this quote. He said, you have to be in the water to catch a wave, which is another way of saying he's like, even a few years ago, poker was still kind of like, it was happening, but like wasn't maybe as culturally relevant as it once was. He thought that was coming back though. So he made the bet that, poker's coming back in a big way. There's a lack of B2B, technology out there. We're going to make a bet that poker's going to come back and we'll be ready in pole position to be the one that powers a lot of these operators' poker's products. And that's where they're at. He made that bet. They went into the water, and that wave is now starting to crest behind them. And Poker Lab, I believe they're going live this summer. They're going to be powering the Canadian Poker Network for some of the provincial lotteries that are now offering poker products. And these guys are off to the races. And I really think, this is going to be a massive infrastructure play that's going to help drive the resurgence of poker. One of the things I love about the way they're building it, Pierre, is, poker as a product for quite a period of time didn't have a ton of innovations. And part of the reason for that is some of these legacy poker platforms, like any legacy platform, has a lot of technical debt, which means it's really tough to just build new products and features on top of legacy technology. So with that lens, they've really taken a thoughtful approach to the technical architecture of their platforms, such that not only now can they rapidly deploy new game formats and new game types for poker, but they have scalability to continue to add new types of products in the future. And, hearing Scott talk about the evolution of poker, and I think you could probably relate to this. He's like, back before Black Friday or back before Uega, like poker was the social network, right? There was no Twitter then. There wasn't even Facebook then. There was nowhere for people to like hang out together, but the poker room was the social network, right? People had the social experience in poker. And, that void has been filled with social media now and these other sort of social engagement platforms. But he's now coming back into poker, thinking about that mechanism and the fact that, people are now looking for shorter form content and shorter form reward cycles. And some of the new game formats that Poker Lab is building on top of this technical infrastructure really plays heavily into that, leans into that. Very, very quick game formats, a lot of social interactivity on top of it. So I'm really hyping them up here, but I'm just stoked to see somebody building in poker once again. I think Poker Lab, with the experience of that team, obviously, signing on as the infrastructure to power the Canadian Poker Network is a huge piece of validation for them. And I think they're going to be one to watch absolutely going forward.
Yeah, it seems to me that social element is what a lot of people crave. Even in the sports betting world, we've seen the success of Dabble, for example, the Australian operator that also is active in the US, that have kind of intertwine the sports betting experience with that social element and the kind of jargon around that type of activity. And poker was always that kind of, especially in person, of course, was that kind of friendly way to meet people and so on. And it seems to be like a ripe type product to reinvent from that regard. We can see, today GG and PokerStars are the two big incumbents in the online poker space, of course, but they are still operating on kind of like legacy platforms where the online poker experience have been the same like it's been for the last 30 years almost. And to your point, the shorter engagement loops, shorter attention span, so on and so it seems to be making this space ripe for disruption. So I like his quote, the co-founder here, of you have to stay in the water to catch a wave. It's a good way of thinking about things to get ahead of the next trend before it happens.
Absolutely. Okay. So that's Poker Lab. Shall we move on?
Yes, let's go for number 3.
All right. So number 3, I'm going to cheat here a little bit. It's actually 2 companies, but they're very similar. So what I really want to highlight here is the model and the product type that they're both putting into market. The 2 companies I will quickly name is Regen and Layup. And both of these products, again, directionally similar. There's some nuanced differences between the two. But what both of these products are, these are betting adjacent fintech products that are automating savings for people through gameplay and through betting. So just to drill down a level further on what that means, Pierre, basically these platforms, when somebody is making a bet with their sportsbook of choice or their DFS platform of choice, at the time of bet placement, users can optionally choose to automatically redirect a percentage of the wager they're about to place into a separate account that is a FDIC insured savings wallet. So all of a sudden, it's this merging up and marrying up of like a personal finance tool with my recreational activity of sports betting or DFS. And to me, like both of what Regen and Layup are doing to me are emblematic of companies that are really trying to now like lower the barriers between these discrete verticals of fintech and traditional real money gaming, and introducing mechanics that allow these two things to exist in a complementary way. What I think is interesting from a narrative perspective is that, these are, through one lens, really helping to drive potentially responsible gameplay. And by pulling funds directly from gameplay and putting them into a savings account, these platforms are creating sustainable savings habits for people as a byproduct of play, rather than competing for that same dollar that somebody's about to wager with. So it's an interesting sort of model, interesting framework. And just to, I guess, point to some of the validation that both of these companies have seen, Regen very recently announced some investment, a strategic investment from Guard Dog, which is the investment arm of Underdog. And it's a responsible gaming innovation fund. And Guard Dog presumably saw Regen as, again, one of these tools that could really help drive responsible gameplay and thus fit neatly under the RG umbrella. And for Regen, what that's going to allow them to do with that investment is to integrate this auto savings feature across the Underdog platform, right? So all of a sudden, users and customers of Underdog, as they're placing their lineups or completing their lineups, they can optionally choose to allocate some percentage of that bet into a wallet that, again, is FDIC insured and is intended to help build sustainable savings habits. I forget what the number was. The team from Regen cited it on my podcast recently, but it was like some crazy number about just like the American population, and probably every population, Canada as well, where I am, just like the savings rates are at all-time lows. There's a lot of reasons for that, but the thesis here is like, personal financial literacy remains probably lower than where it should be. And products and tools like Regen and like Layup can help introduce a little bit of fluency, a little bit of good, habits into the gameplay that people are already doing. So I think this is a pretty interesting concept. The challenge is now for them to, convince people that, saving some of their money rather than risking it through a real money wager is, the right decision to make. But at least the infrastructure is there. The positioning is there. I think these guys have a really interesting opportunity to really own that lane of, of responsible gameplay through, through these savings wallets integrated with sportsbooks.
Yeah, what an interesting business model. Me personally, I'm a big fan of in my savings account, whenever I spend anything, the kind of to round off to the nearest number, that little that little margin is transferred into a separate account, and you don't even think about it. You kind of go with the flow, and then a year later you look at that balance, and it's actually like a meaningful amount of money. So it creates an exciting little kind of side deposit of things, and who knows, maybe this will turn into something good for the people who end up saving.
Absolutely. It can only stand to help, I think. And it's early for both Regen and Layup, but it's going to be interesting to watch this new product category get adoption and just see how this all plays out. So I got to tip my hat for the way they're going about it. And again, trying to, identify these broader problems at a more societal level. Again, the savings rates being at all-time lows. This is potentially an answer to that. So let's see. Next one here. Let's move right along, Pierre. Startup number 4, and you asked me earlier a question I actually didn't answer. So let me answer that question. You asked from a betting startups capital perspective if we've actually made any investments yet. We have announced our first investment. So I'm going to shout out that company now. And I guess part of me becoming an investor is talking up my own book a little bit. So
here we go. Yeah, that's part of the gig, Jesse. That's part of the gig.
Part of the gig. Right. So the next one I want to shout out here is insightplay.ai. InsightPlay was founded by 2 guys, Javier and Christian, both with deep industry experience. In Javier's case, he founded a website back in the day in LATAM. I think it was a LATAM football soccer website that was acquired by Better Collective. So he's kind of been through the journey before. These guys have deep industry experience. And what InsightPlay is and what they've gotten together to work on is enterprise grade AI. And look, I mean, AI is everywhere. We know this. We're repeating something we all inherently know. But what InsightPlay is doing is building enterprise grade AI solutions and autonomous agents that operators can integrate directly into their core infrastructure. So, that's a very sort of vague positioning statement. More tangibly, what that means in terms of some of the use cases that these guys are coming to market with are agentic, basically agents that help on the marketing side to begin with. So think acquisition and retention and reactivation. The use case that I think is the coolest is the reactivation bit and win back. And, right now win back is generally achieved through, reaching out to dormant players or lapsed players, and, whether that's a phone call or otherwise, but that requires, a human or a person to sit there and initiate that call and have that conversation and try and compel that lapsed player to re-engage and reactivate. InsightPlay has built this insane technology that basically uses a voice-activated AI agent to make that call and have that conversation. And I could sit here and talk for 20 minutes about it, and I could not do it justice in terms of just like how impressive this is, Pierre. So I won't try to. But look, as I said, the thing about InsightPlay is like they're trying to deeply integrate into the operator's stack. This is not a bolt-on solution. And I think right now, as we collectively at the society level are trying to figure out like where AI fits into our life, our work, our businesses. A lot of it right now is looked at as a bolt-on solution. Like, how can I bolt AI on to make this thing a bit easier? InsightPlay is taking a much different sort of fundamental philosophical approach where they're trying to like deeply integrate AI into the core engines of these operators. And I don't even think were incorporated at this time last year, or maybe just a year ago. In the last year, in their first year, not only have they got an enterprise grade product and technology ready, they have commercialized it. They have integrations with operators in LATAM, some tier 1 brands in LATAM. And InsightPlay now is looking to broaden their horizons. They have certainly found product market fit with those LATAM operators. They proved the model, they validated the technology, it's scalable, it's working, it's driving the KPIs. They're now, got their sights set on, other regions and, namely the US. And a little while ago, about a month ago, they announced a $500K seed round, which involved some of our mutual friends here. Shout out Benji Cherniak, shout out Jeffrey Haas. Some very very prolific people that have seen the vision, and not only seen the vision with InsightPlay, but have seen what they've done in such a short amount of time, both from a technology development perspective, but also that commercialization piece. And you and I have talked on this podcast before about the dreaded integration roadmap for B2B companies that get stuck on these backlogs, and somehow InsightPlay has blast right through that. They've been live for months now with some operators, and it's a very exciting technology, very exciting product. And for me, Javier and Christian are emblematic of the types of founders that Betting Startups Capital wants to back, right? They have some experience in the space. I think that is such a leg up for people, even if they just worked at an entry-level role in the industry, even in customer service, to have a little bit of experience in the industry, being able to understand some of the nuances of it, being able to have that inside perspective and spot opportunities. These guys have all of that. And the speed at which they're shipping, the approach in which they're taking to the commercial discussions and the B2B sales, it's just the full package. So, really excited to be aligned with them and part of them and supporting them in a very small way, but really more exciting to see them as a case study in what AI can do from a, transformative change perspective for some of these operators that are stuck with some of that legacy, technology that we talked about. So, shout out Insight Play.
Yeah, very, very exciting, Jesse. And I think there's like a sense of urgency amongst pretty much all tech companies right now to ensure that you are up to speed when it comes to this kind of like wave of AI capabilities and improved efficiencies and improved optimization and so on and so forth that we have ahead of ourselves. I really do feel this is a sense of FOMO in some regard, or a sense of urgency, because I think it's dawning on most organizations that either you adapt or you are left behind. And having these type of opportunities to bring aboard, these type of optimization tools are improving your current operation. It really is with the time. And so I would imagine that for a company like this, when they present what they do, they will have a much easier time to get the meeting, let's say, than many other organizations that are kind of blending into to just being another supplier. And so it's quite interesting from that commercial perspective as well, that it seems to me that it's a business that will be able to generate leads and get in front of people. And then it's up to them, of course, to make the pitch and to close the deal.
Absolutely. No, I think the point you make here, just to stick with it for 1 second here, this sense of like FOMO, like I'm absolutely picking up on that as well. And I do think probably not too long from now, that FOMO is going to shift from this feeling of like FOMO to one of almost a threat, where if you're not rapidly moving towards AI and leaning into it, like it's going to go from FOMO to like existential threat. Panic. Potentially. Yeah. Panic is probably a better word. But exactly that. I think that's where we're heading. So I actually saw something really that really resonated with me on Twitter yesterday. Somebody was talking about, and look, my Twitter timeline is flooded right now with like Claude code. So that's all it is. And it's probably the algorithm giving me what I'm interested in right now. But somebody tweeted something to the effect of like, where Claude Code is right now feels like back when Bitcoin was $100, right? So like we're pretty early right now, but like it's about to take off. Like it feels like the point in time right now for AI is where Bitcoin was when it was $100, right? Right. Which that really resonated. I'm like, that is exactly how it feels. So like I definitely missed out on Bitcoin was $100. I do not want to miss out or be left behind with this new gold rush here. So yeah, man, how organizations and companies are responding to this. I mean, I think that's to be one of the dominant themes of the next 12 months for the industry and for every industry, frankly.
Absolutely. Exciting times, this is. So, startup number 5. Do we have 5 or 6?
I'm going to bring 5 here, I think. So let's call this the last one. I could keep going, but we'll save some for later here. The 5th and final one on my list for today, I'm going to shout out, is a company called Rimble. Rimble is a, let me see, make sure I position them correctly. I mean, really at the end of the day, what Rimble is, what they started as was doing micro markets and pricing for esports. They've expanded a little bit since then, doing micro markets for an odds origination, both for esports, but for other niche sports that include motorsports, cricket, and kabaddi, which is an Indian game. And the founder, Shivam, to me is like one of my favorite founders I've met for a number of reasons. 2 things that I love about Shivam that to me is a through line for, again, entrepreneurs that I really resonate with. One of the things that I love about Shivam is before he started Rimble, he worked for a few years at Simplebet back in the day. Simplebet, of course, since acquired by DraftKings, but Simplebet really was the engine powering and pricing a lot of the micro markets that are now sort of mainstream products with the tier 1 operators. Shivam worked at Simplebet, and he saw the traction that micro markets as a product category were getting. Obviously, he was getting deep technical experience actually developing those products from a technical perspective. And I think as his story goes, COVID happened, everybody was staying home. He was playing a lot of esports. He's like, well, why aren't we doing micro markets for esports? And that was sort of the origin story for him. So he started Rimble as his response to that. Again, getting that experience working for a company in the industry for a couple of years first, and then seeing that opportunity and going out on your own. I love that. So full points to Shivam for taking that leap. The other thing I love about the way he's approached it is it's entirely bootstrapped. Shivam has built an engineering heavy team. I think when I last talked to him, the company was like 8 people, 7 of which were engineers, right? Mm-hmm. So like they are building hardcore technology. They are indexing heavily towards like top level technical engineering talent to build the products that they're building. And they're getting really insane traction now. And Rimble flies under the radar a bit, Pierre, because number one, Shivam, he's not out there hyping himself up a lot. He's an engineer. They're head down, they're cooking, they're cranking, they're delivering for their B2B partners. But they are doing some pretty cool stuff. Their products are really cool. They just did a deal where they are going to be doing all of the odds origination for F1 as a motorsport. So really exciting and yet another sort of emerging sport. Not that F1's emerging, but from a betting perspective, it's definitely emerging. And, Shivam has built a really powerful offering that has been integrated with, I think, most, if not all, of the tier 1 US operators up to this point. And I know he's got his sights set a lot bigger. So again, what looks a little bit niche is actually a lane that I think Shivam and Rimble basically own entirely, which is pricing, micro markets and in-play markets for these more niche sports, further driving interest in these sports, further driving engagement with these sports. Obviously, that's resonating with, the data rights holders for these different sports. And, I think Rimble's off to the races. And I'm going to do my best here to speak for Shivam and hype them up because they need to be more well-known. They're really flying under the radar and by all accounts, crushing it and doing it the way Shivam wants to be doing it, right? Fully bootstrapped, funding their growth with revenue organically. He could raise money. He lives in San Francisco. He's surrounded by capital there. He chooses not to. And I just really respect and admire that approach. And, want to make sure everybody listening to the Next.io podcast is aware of all the cool things Shivam and Rimble are up to.
Brilliant, Jesse. Thank you so much for bringing up some of these most exciting startups in the space right now. I certainly am checking it out as you're talking here on the side. And it's cool to learn new things as well, that people are finding their lanes, they are finding these niche products, they are finding their own space in order to kind of crack that code and to create something meaningful. But Jesse, thank you so much for today. Best of luck and congratulations to the launch of the Betting Startups Capital. Congratulations on deploying the first check as well. And I'm looking forward when in a year's time from now we can catch up again and see exactly, maybe we can follow up then what checks you have been writing around this time frame. And more than anything, I'm looking forward to see you live in New York in just a little bit of time. And can't wait to catch up there, Jesse. Thank you so much for today.
I love our annual tradition, Pierre. If anything, if it's like it was last year, I'll blink and then tomorrow I'll wake up and it'll be this time next year. Groundhog Day will be back. So this is always fun. I'm very honored to be on your podcast, Pierre. It remains my favorite in the industry. So, I can only follow those that have done it before me. And I really look up to everything you built. And it's a model for me as I'm going about building my own business here. And appreciate your friendship, your collaboration, and most importantly, excited to see you in a few short days here in New York.
Brilliant, Jesse. You're the man. Thank you so much for today.
Cheers.